Welcome back to the comeback season. This is the place where we have the hard conversations about what it actually takes to turn a setback into a setup for something greater. We talk about the mindset, the grit, and the spiritual alignment required to rebuild a life when this world is getting tough. Today, I am joined by my friend Kym Coco, the founder of Swagtail and a brilliant author who holds a master's degree in sports kinesiology. Kym combines her deep knowledge of neurobiology and yoga to help people find vibrant well being. Kym, I would love for you to start by telling us a little bit about yourself, how you got in this world of work, and what your favorite thing is about it.
Thank you for having me, Nicole. It's so great to be here with you and your listeners. I am so passionate about a growth mindset. And I think that's something that served me well to take me from someone interested in health and fitness and well being to, wow, how do our emotions fit into this picture? How does my mind play a role in what I'm experiencing in the world? How does that impact my relationships? And this idea of following the breadcrumbs of inspiration and curiosity, that's been able to help me get to where I am, do something that I love every day, and get to meet amazing people like you and my community.
You have so much energy. We right before we pressed record, I asked you a deep question, and this is about your late husband. And this was honestly the thing about you that is just inspiring. I lack of better words. You have been through one hell of the last few years, and look at you. This is Kym, and to our listeners, this energy, this outgoingness, this is you. This isn't even a show for everybody. So let's start there. The reason that we're diving into this today is because of your powerful story involving Steve, whose experience surviving this catastrophic accident changed obviously both of your lives forever. So let's start off there. You tell us a little bit about Stephen and what brought you here, my friend.
That's a great question, Nicole. Let me take you back in time to how I met Steve before he was my husband. I was just finishing my master's degree in sports kinesiology, and he, in his work, was doing emotional kinesiology, which was something I hadn't really heard of. And it was at that same time I was learning yoga and meditation and how to bring this whole body, whole being experience into something that's tangible for me. I knew how to be well in my body, and yet I had anxious mind. I was stressed out. There was a lot of anger from family growing up and misunderstanding circumstances that I was raised with. And that anger and that emotional upset was hindering my ability to have great relationships. And a colleague said, well, I know this guy, Steve. We've all had that. You know this guy. And I think he'd be a great resource for you. And sure enough, Steve and I had a wonderful conversation. He had an amazing library, and me, being a voracious reader, thought, I'm all in. So we would start swapping books and having these really deep intellectual conversations. And I inspired me to go drive literally 10 hours across Nevada to Utah to his workshop that he was teaching. And you know what's really funny? I drove there faster than he flew because from our small town in Northern
I don't know if you
California,
want to admit that.
well, this gets better. He had to fly to San Francisco, have a layover, and then fly to Salt Lake City.
Okay, fair enough.
I know.
It's like, how fast were you driving?
You can't go fast enough through Nevada, let me tell you. The amazing thing is that by Sunday afternoon, he recognized a little bit more about me as a person, a natural leader. I'm engaging. I like to connect with people. I like to help everybody in the group learn things. And I picked up his material very quickly. By Sunday, he said, I know this is very last minute, but you drove here faster than I flew. What's your take on driving back together? We had enough mutual friends. He ran it by his partner, said, this is the deal. We could talk about all of these topics in more detail. And we did. And we had this really incredible. I don't know if you've ever spent 10 hours in the car with somebody. You know very quickly if you're compatible.
Yeah.
And we turned out to be fast friends. Fast forward another year and a half, 2 years later, I had left Chico, gone to Brazil, gone to South Africa, was teaching yoga, came back basically to remove my items from a friend's garage, and ran into Steve again. We had stayed in touch via email, and at that point, we connected, and there was a spark. There was something that said, give this a try. And so we did. We risked our friendship and gave this romantic world a whirl. And we had a wonderful marriage. We worked and taught side by side for 13 years almost. We traveled across the country 30 plus times. We obviously both like road trips and found a beautiful blend of this mind, body, spirit connection that we thrived in our own relationship, and then were able to share as a gift to others who came to our workshops or who now get to experience Steve through the book I wrote about his life, Miracle on the Mountainside.
Oh, there's so much to unpack there. I don't even know where to start. The first place I want to start, though, because there's people listening that are like, have maybe been through what you just went through, because this is new. This is only a few years. This isn't like this happened 10 years ago. The growth mindset versus the fixed mindset. And here's the thing that we have to remember: anything in life, taking personal responsibility is about how you respond. So, right there, sister, is a good example of where you, as Kym Coco, starts, is you have a growth mindset. And by the sounds of it, the little you have told me about Steve, so did he. And he wasn't the victim to his circumstances. Like, you guys, when you told me your story about what happened and then how you responded to that, and it wasn't an option for the two of you to be in that. So let's start there with that, simple words. How do your thoughts, emotions, and body work together for that journey? I just asked you the question, but I have one thing I actually, before you respond to that, is the emotional connection that you guys had too. I want you to intertwine that in with that.
Well, let's go from this really wonderful marriage we had, and I'll answer your question in this story. Steve became really ill. I don't know, back in 2021. And it was a light switch of, you go into the hospital, you might not come out 48 hours later. And we instantly shifted our priorities. We cut things that were unnecessary so that we could focus on our priorities, the values we had at our core: love, presence, really meaningful connections, integrity, and this knowing of our spiritual nature. So, this emotional connection, based on the work we had done, we're very aware of the presence we wanted to have in this time of illness, because he lost 20 or 30 pounds in that hospital visit. He came out looking like a different person, and we didn't know how much longer he had to live. Doctors were confused. He was high maintenance. He had a lot of lingering conditions since his motorcycle accident, which did happen before I met him, and we can get into later because it's in the book. However, that's a life changer. So we cut things that were unnecessary. We chose to connect in meaningful ways. We have this opportunity every day to create a little bit of space. And in that space, we can start scrolling or get distracted or look to things that we thought would fill us up or we think will give us that extra energy. And we chose to settle in, connect to each other, talk about what mattered. We actually wrote Miracle on the Mountainside by stories he told me about his life. And I have many other books to write as a result of those conversations. And connecting to ourselves. So even though he was in pain, he took responsibility for that. He never put the responsibility on me. He did need help. And I became a full-time caregiver overnight, which we don't get trained for. I knew the body, but this was new territory.
Yeah.
And so the self-responsibility, this ownership of our emotional spectrum first, and then bringing our best to the table, no matter what that best looked like every day, because that changes. It changes within each day. And so to say, I'm having a hard time with this. Wow, you're having a hard time with this. Let's figure out a path forward. Or maybe we need help. So in this connection with each other and our own self, I could say, I'm not going to shy away from the reality of things. I'm going to do my best. It's going to be tough. But by being fully present and honoring the emotions that showed up in all of those hard times, it's allowed me to be able to live again. If I turn down the volume on the grief and the sadness and all of the anticipatory grief, all those moments I lost him in the role as husband, driver, co chef in the kitchen, all of those things, I would have also dulled my ability to be present now. And I didn't want that to happen. And neither did he. So that helped in the process of this caregiving and life transformation phase. And then creating was really a big deal. I found that satisfaction is a lot easier to find many times than joy. It's subtle. It's
Yeah.
something simple like looking out at the waves, looking out at a bird on a tree, moving in the direction of a goal, even if it's the smallest step, and nobody else gets to see it, but you know you made movement. And so, in the time when Steve was ill, I took his limited dietary restrictions and started to make a cookbook, which I have a full cookbook I made over the course of the 2 years. And that gave me a zest for life because I didn't know what my life post Steve would look like. And there was always the hope that maybe he would get better. And then when we knew really that wasn't going to be the trajectory, having seeds planted of what that creativity could be in my life gave me a lifeline to move forward. And so the emotional element, if I come back to that, we had that as a connection as a couple because we honored that aspect of ourselves and wanted to enhance it, use it as a way to bring our best self forward. And then it's helped me in the grief recovery process because I'm honoring that so that I can be all in, all here right now as best I can.
I have to go back to that fixed versus growth mindset with what even Steve clearly had. Like he deep down, he probably suspected that he may not make it, but he didn't live like that. In the short time he had left, he lived as full potential. There's still any opportunity for possibility. And clearly you still have that. Look what you did. You took a moment where most people would just want to bury themselves and you wrote a book. Right down to recipes. Like, come on, let's talk about that, Kym. Like, there has to be something in there that kept you going in that moment. Why don't we talk about that before we move on?
Yes, and I'm going to use Steve as an example because before I met him, he did have a motorcycle accident. It's the intro of The Miracle on the Mountainside. He was driving up a mountain road one beautiful sunny summer day on his motorcycle, and then he hit shale unexpectedly, and the bike goes sliding 40 feet toward a guardrail. And you've had those moments where you get a split second decision to make a choice. How am I going to respond? And his thought was jump the guardrail, don't get stuck between metal. Only once he looked over the guardrail, it was no longer a soft landing, it was a cliff. And he went tumbling down, broke bones in 110 places, stick puncturing his stomach, helmet cracked, glasses gone. It just a disaster.
Wow.
And that choice led to a near death experience, this bigger connection to the divine, a choice to say, yes, I want to be back in my body. Did get a miracle rescue on the side of the mountain from firemen driving up that same isolated road.
No
And
way. So he didn't call. They were just there.
he was lying on the side of the mountain, bleeding to death, hoping he would take his last breath before coyotes found him. He knew he could not move. That was it.
God is so good.
And I
Man.
know, amazing, right? And in that in that experience, he did not know what he was going to encounter back in his body. He just had that overwhelming faith, that knowing that I am supported in this life. I am going to get the tools, the resources, the connections. I have the spiritual wellness, the wellspring is the word I'm looking for inside of me. It's coming through me. And he had 28 reconstructive surgeries, 3 years in a hospital
20,
bed, 28,
20, 20,
28,
28. In how long?
a little over 3 years. 3 4 years, yeah.
Wow.
He and just you think of the body, what it needs to take to heal a broken arm. Can you imagine healing that much at once?
Kym, I've had a broken foot for 4 months and I'm still struggling. It's only 50% healed, and I couldn't imagine I got one bone. Wow.
And you think about we talk about identity shifts, right? He's pulled out of everything normal. He's now in a hospital bed. He said friends started to visit maybe the first week or two after he was out of the intensive care unit. And then that trickled to almost nobody.
Yeah.
And his business, his employees took records and started their own companies. And so they folded their interior design business that he had with his ex-wife, or his wife at the time. And it's amazing to say, okay, he wasn't getting well because he was waiting for other people to help him get well. He
Ooh.
had an incident where he had a migraine. He was introduced to other techniques that could help him manage energy, shift his mindset, take ownership of the fear that was within of starting over, the the uncertainty he had for his future, afraid to tell his wife that I don't want to go back to our business. Just owning again the emotional landscape, and then from that honesty building a path forward that's empowering. And then he started to get well. So it took 3 more years to learn how to walk because he got to keep his right leg. And I'm saying all of that to say Steve gave me a blueprint of what's possible when we are faced with incredible adversity and the challenges that he had before I met him, and how he even navigated the pain he was in those final years, was a reminder that we do have this capacity to shift our focus, to acknowledge when we get triggered emotionally and yet choose differently, because we know innately that joy feels better than sadness, that helping and connecting with others feels different and better than being isolated and disconnected. And so instead of looking at wanting that 6 years to happen overnight, the gift of learning every single moment of how we get to choose, that's the ultimate gift of empowerment in my
I
mind.
was just going to say that. That's incredible. That just came out of your mouth because I was just thinking it. And it's the small advancements, the small changes, the small shifts in mindset that, like, it's funny that big catastrophic things happen to us, life changes. Sometimes it's decades of trauma, but yet when we make up our mind to move forward in life, we think it's just going to happen overnight like that, and it doesn't. Like if Steve would have had that mindset, he wouldn't have been where he's at. So let's break that down quickly before we move into our next question. The mindset, but moving small and making those changes along the way to get you to where you can be.
Yeah, so let's take some small examples. In the hospital, when people would visit him, or in his home when he was not well yet, but on that trajectory, he would find humor as a way to connect with people. Instead of telling the same story of, yeah, I had this surgery or this one's coming up, he was the best joke teller. So he made a conscious decision that I'm going to be the funniest person. I'm going to leave people feeling better than when they came in. And he was the one who probably needed the boost.
Yeah.
And yet, his ability to give and laugh, finding joyful movies, sharing movies became his thing. He would share movies and then find joy sharing those movies or books with other people. So, this ability to give, even with what resources we have. And that was even an attitude choice. That's
Yeah.
amazing. This idea of meditation, using our mind. He would say he would play the Pac-Man game, and he would imagine Pac-Man going through and eating all the inflammation and the toxins in his system, and he would just watch and imagine his body getting better. That takes time for the physical body to heal, and yet he
Mhm.
could gamify it, and we can do that too, whether that's picturing a sense of lightness or a flow in our bodies. We can picture that before sports. We can picture that before we go to sleep, and just imagining ourselves rested and content as our head is on a pillow. We have this
Mhm.
ability to shift how we're viewing our bodies in the moment toward well being. Those are two examples.
Neuroplasticity is a real thing. We absolutely have the power to do that in all the small parts of life. What you just said, the little details, minute details that we don't give credit to that aren't a big deal. These are the big deals here. This is what makes it happen.
There's so much research now about how
Yeah.
the mind influences our physiology and our interactions and the world around us. So why not start to learn how to harness that? And it seems crazy. And it also seems like a myth that you're going to be able to control external circumstances perfectly. That's not true. Life happens. And it's our response and the trajectory we start to create moving forward that starts the shift. And that's always within our control.
Let's start talking about that inner critic, because here's the reality. We're painting Steve, and don't get me wrong, he is was an incredible man to get through what he did, but that inner critic still must have gotten the best of him at times. So let's talk about that. How can we turn our inner critic into our greatest coach when life triggers that sense of fear, which he would have had with a bajillion broken bones, and who knows what his life was going to look like, from fear and instability into where he wants to go?
Fear is a real deal. Fear comes up and it can seem like it's overwhelming. That happened to him on the accident, getting better. It seemed to want to take over many days in the caregiving world and many days without Steve, wondering what my future has turned into or what it's going to be like moving forward. So, acknowledging the fear is really helpful. Instead of trying to shove it away, just acknowledging that voice in the head, because how our response in the brain, that fear signal helps keep us alive. It's a survival mechanism. Cheer that on. Just don't give it the microphone. You can say
Yeah.
thank you for being part of the team, but we have these different elements of the brain. So, yes, acknowledging fear as a real factor, super great. I'm going to say what was interesting in watching caregiving, even with Steve's tools, there were several months in a row where all he wanted to do was die. He was in so much pain. They couldn't manage the pain. And he had so many great resources from years of meditation, mindfulness practice, these emotional balancing tools. And yet pain can still make you pay attention in ways where you feel like you don't have control. And that was hard as a caregiver to say, I can't fix this. So that stirred up different emotions in me. We had different, we all have this inner critic, and our voices were telling us different things. I wanted to
Yeah.
fix it and I couldn't, and I felt ashamed and guilty. And his was, I can't fix the pain. Let's just end it. I've got tools. We could just take
Yeah,
it home,
right?
right?
Yeah.
And that was hard to watch.
Hmm.
So I think another tool, in addition to just acknowledging the inner critic, is sitting and pausing and giving it the voice. And then when you step back, you can recognize, wow, there are other voices here too. That's not the only one. That's just
Hmm.
one voice. We can look at the logical, step into, in like my case of a caregiver, what can I do to plan and make things better? Because sometimes the action of what I could control would help me feel better. You could go into this thrill of, there were moments I would see a glimpse of my future, that thrilling element of life, the creativity. We like that. So acknowledging that in the small moments. And then pausing in meditation, getting out in nature, taking walks, and
Big time.
sensing myself as a part of this bigger whole that we know we are a part of helps. It puts the inner critic voice in perspective. And then the third thing I found really helpful is, like Nicole, if you have a broken foot, I would come and encourage you. You've got this. Your body is so smart. Look at all the things you're doing. You're doing podcasting and a summit, and you go, girl. Your inner critic doesn't say that.
No.
So, what if we stepped back and imagined that I was talking to myself like I'd be talking to a really good friend? What words of encouragement can I give instead? And if you even use the third person, I could say, Kym, wow, look at what you've got on your plate right now. How are you standing up today? I'm amazed. You are incredible. And celebrating ourselves from maybe that third person vantage point helps. We're so much kinder to others than we are often ourselves. So maybe step out a minute and play that role.
So funny you just said that too. We are so aligned, my friend. I was on stage last weekend, and it was one of the things I said to the crowd. If your friends talked to you or lifted you up the way you do for yourself, would you have any friends? And I don't think there was one person in that audience that said yes, because we all do it. We all are our worst enemy with that. And let's break that down a little further into fear, and incorporating fear. Fear can be your fuel. Now, if you let fear get the best of you, then no, it's not going to be your fuel. It's going to be the rear roadblock. But it's so important to still acknowledge because any neuroplasticity isn't going to happen if you're not aware of it and you don't have the intention to change it. So you need to be aware of your fear. You need to get curious about your fear. Where is this coming from and why? And how is this going to help me? Now, if we let fear get the best of us, we're gonna overshadow that logic part of our brain, and that's going to work against us. But it is important to sit with that. So, going back to Steve's story, I'm sure he had lots of time to sit in those hospital beds, and think about that. But then making the decision at that point to not let it hold him back, and he must have gotten curious. He turned it into the humor in it, right? That was one response that he had is, how can I take this fear and make it good? Well, because that's what we all should be doing. How can I take this thing that happened to me and make this world a better place? So I want you to
Okay.
respond to that.
I want to tell you a story that's in this book, and it's
Okay.
wonderful. And I'm going to preface this with this idea that, okay, the emotional centers, we think of it often emotional, just right brain, but we have an emotional center in the right and left brain. The left brain side going through the amygdala as the fear, but the emotional energy going through the right brain is the thrill seeker in
Yeah.
us. It's a very intense energy on both accounts. And so it's not a big switch to start to look at something different. And so let's take a thrill, for example. Steve's lying, he's actually starting to get better at this point. He convinces his wife to drive them to Oregon for a workshop. They had to borrow a truck that he could get his wheelchair into, like with a ramp. He's learning these tools on how to help himself get better, how to shift the mindset to be prepared for what's next. And he has a dream. If you think of Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. He had a vision of building a retreat in Oregon. And wow, I could someday teach people what I'm learning. They could come to this property, they could learn it. I could make these walking trails with chimes in the trees that would have all these beautiful harmonics. The thrill of building something to share what he was learning and transform his pain into a way that could uplift others was exhilarating to him. And think of the intensity that fear can have when we find something that can be equally transformative in that thrill side. It can be the dream at first, and it can be a dream for a while. They're on the way home from Oregon. A snowstorm hits. They can't
Of
come over the
course.
pass into California. We get the impulse, the voice of God, the spirit within, whatever you want to call it. Well, we've had this idea of this retreat. Let's go talk to a real estate agent while we're here. There's a big sign right by the gas station. So he hobbles over. He's starting to use crutches a little bit, can hobble over, talks to a real estate agent. His wife comes in furious 20 minutes later because he disappears in the snowstorm, finds him, and they met Kay. He told Kay his idea. He had the dream literally downloaded. He drew the property on a napkin. This is what I'm looking for. I want 20 acres. I'd like to do this. I'd like a water supply, all the things. He said, I just ask you don't give up on my dream. Keep looking. And they found, Kay would stay in touch, found a property about a year later. And Steve thought, well, it doesn't have everything I'm looking for, but it checks a lot of boxes. So he and Paula put in an offer. Wasn't accepted. And Steve was relieved because at this point he thinks, okay, it wasn't my dream. And Paula was disappointed. She really wanted to move and start a new life and build something. Well, it turns out 2 years later, Kay is ecstatic over the phone. Steve, get up here right now. I found your exact property. It's what you drew on the napkin. It is here. It has everything. It's everything you're asking for, and it's going to go into foreclosure. Get up here. You guys need to buy this now. And everything, it gives me goosebumps as I'm telling this story because
Totally. Wow.
everything came together, including how the finances, because they were rebuilding their life, he and Paula, even down to how the finances came together to buy the property was amazing. If you build it, they will come. He thought it, he dreamed it, he had the thrill. He didn't get caught up in the fear of how, when, why. Well, he knew the why. He was curious. He knew that. But the
Yeah.
details, he let that go and trusted, and he stayed connected to the thrill of the dream, and it manifested. And how cool is that?
You just said something though that so many of us do. We expect it to be the perfect time. When this situation happens, I want this more than anything, but it needs to be perfectly aligned and I have to have all the answers figured out. I don't care how old you are. You will never have all the answers figured out. You will never know exactly how it's supposed to go. You just need to go. You just need to do it. And by the sounds of it, it's what he did.
Can I tell you a revelation I had recently
I would love that.
about
This is
this?
all coming together. Let's hear it.
Do you remember the game Leapfrog that you played as a kid?
Yep.
Yeah, somebody crouches down, you hop over their back and you leap forward, and then you crouch down and they hop over your back and jump
Have you
forward.
ever tried to do that as an adult? I don't recommend it.
I was just thinking, you could laugh about that. It's
I've
very
done
funny.
it. Sorry, go on.
It's so true. Okay, but that's how I feel our dreams are. So we're that. If we have this idea side of us, this mindset side of us, it's invisible. Until I verbalize my ideas to you, Nicole, they're here. They're in my own headspace, right? They're invisible. So that idea leapfrogs from me into the future. But I'm here in Kym that you see here and now. And it's interesting. So the idea is out there, it's leapt over, it's moved forward. And then as I start to take action in the direction of moving toward that goal, that idea, that dream, I get to leap over my idea. But guess what? The idea, I leap in, not into the space of the idea, I leap past it because every step I grew along the way to move toward that idea opened up other doors of possibility. There are new ideas. I've evolved. I've modified my expectations, my idea of what I want. And so I jump forward. But in that jumping forward, now my ideas have leapt over me again. And it's this ongoing cycle of evolution. It's never done. It's always expanding and evolving. So this idea that, well, I'm going to get there and it's going to be the right time or just the right way, it's constantly in flux. And if you can think of it like a game or think of jumping over another adult human in Leapfrog, it gives you a lighter attitude as we move in these directions of goals we have for ourselves.
I'm going to picture that every time I set myself a new goal now. But it's true. But the interesting part of it is why, as humans, do we have to feel that we will know the outcome? We will never know the outcome. And even if we have a goal like what this, for case in point, the comeback season podcast, this started with a little idea with just Christy and I. We were just going to be talking and thinking we'll post them on just social media which they're also on social media, but we never thought of Spotify. We never thought of what this would grow into and the connections that we'd make and what this did for my personal business. So taking this as an example, and the pity parties were still pretty big a year ago in Nicole's world. It's only been in the last, I don't know, 6, 7 months that the balloons of pity parties have come to an end ish. But if my point is I didn't have the answers, we never will have the answers, and we need to stop self-sabotaging by feeling that we do, because the day that we're like, let's just get curious of what's going to happen, let's have a goal, let's have that a goal, but just an idea of the direction, but we might be leaping past it quickly, right?
Yes. Yes. And I'll give you a really great example that might tie some of those ideas together. Before Steve transitioned, we were here at this house. We had to change the leach field from the septic. It could no longer be replaced where it was, so they had to dig a hole all the way up to the front of the property and replace it there. Well, when you're caregiving and someone's in their final 3 months of life, that's not usually what you're thinking about.
Fair enough.
And at the same time, there is that mind in me, that voice, that little voice that was like, wouldn't it be nice if you built a labyrinth out front? And I actually bought 2 pallets of pavers at the time and had them delivered. Okay. It's taken me 2.5 years to actually open up the pallets of pavers. I did it this past weekend and I cried.
Incredible.
I was really sad. It was the first project I was able to tackle without Steve in our property, a place that we've built and loved. And you talk about letting the pity party happen. It's just saying I'm acknowledging a sense of loss, and that
Yeah.
hurts and it's sad and damn, it sucks.
I was just thinking that it sucks. Lack
And
of better
and
words.
yes, and let yourself have it. because it's not coming back. And we know that. Our logical mind knows that. But let's let the little kid in me have that tantrum for a few minutes.
Yeah. No, that's a good on the other side of things is important because half the issues that I've had in the last 7 years on this journey that I started was that I didn't recognize a lot of my pain. I pushed it down. I didn't acknowledge what happened to me in my life. The people pleaser just kept trying to do just that, and just make everybody happy without understanding what was going on inside of me. And we have people listening to that right now and really maybe stuck and going, I actually I'm in the fire right now. And so let's talk about that because we know how hard that is, Kym, when you're in that mess, that messy middle, and sometimes you don't even know what's ways up. So as the caregiver with Steve, this wasn't in our questions, what was that fire in you that kept going, especially when you knew that you might be losing this battle?
I mentioned earlier that Steve and I had most most days conversations about meaningful life. We had this ability to look at what we had now, and he recognized that our paths were going different ways. And he said, "Girl, you're going to need structure when I'm gone." And I thought, yeah, 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 because he knows I'm spontaneous. I like to have fun. I like to go on a whim and use my intuition and follow it because it's led me to many great things. And after that conversation, which was very heartfelt and full of tears for both of us, I thought I could use golf as a way for structure. And so I made this list of 100 golf courses I'd want to play. And I took that list and I stuck it in my desk drawer. And it sounded exciting. It sounded fun. I wanted to travel. I loved being in the van with the dogs and mostly with Steve on these adventures. And yet, as I put the piece of paper away, I didn't really want to go because I knew it would mean Steve wasn't with me anymore. And yet, that was an important seed that was planted because that was something that could help me move forward. There was another time where we were traveling back to California and we stopped in Utah, and there was an artist I loved at this show. And I thought, oh, can we go into the art show? And he said, yeah, I'll give it a try. So, we hobbled him in. He sat down while I walked to the gallery. And within, 15 minutes, he was just miserable. So I helped him back to the van and I said, do you mind if I go back in? By all means, go in, honey. And I found a piece I really liked. So I didn't tell him, but I bought it. And I just sent it to my cousin's house in Salt Lake City because he
He
had
knew
never
nothing about
had
it.
to know. But it was me, it was my art. I knew he
Fair
wouldn't like
enough.
it,
Yeah.
but it was another seed that I gave myself permission to have a life, which, you want to make God laugh, notify him of your plans. My my cousin and his wife got pregnant. They needed to make a nursery, and guess what? They needed to get rid of that painting, and they had to mail it to me, and Steve had not passed yet. So he goes, "What's this?" Well, this is the art I bought for my office, and it was a good moment of an honest conversation. But this idea that I could have really withheld joy from myself now and in the future, and I thought, there were moments I would give myself permission, even if there was a twinge of guilt at first, to say, I deserve to live. Steve wants me to live. I want to live vibrantly. And that's one of the things he loved most about me. Why would I want to hide that light? So, even amidst the art and the humor that came from that story, he helped me hang it on my wall. We had a good laugh about it. And yet at the same time, it's really just this idea that we're meant to live in that vibrancy. And
Yeah.
how can we give ourselves that permission in small ways and the bigger ways too, no matter what situation we find ourselves in?
One thing you and Steve did not stop doing, and that was action. And I tell my clients this all the time. Motivation does not start before action. Action will always start before motivation. Your brain needs proof. So your brain needed proof that you were capable of surviving on your own. That was a big one. You needed to do that. So you knew you needed to build that foundation. Steve knew that he needed to make sure before he left this earth that his wife could do that. But you guys never stopped moving forward. You never stayed stagnant. You had moments where you reflected and you acknowledged and you had that intention of that moment However, you didn't let it drown you in your sorrows. So let's talk about what you learned about yourself. And these 100 games, what number are we at, friend? Did we finish them?
Oh, not yet. This is my new phrase, moving at the speed of trust. Because
Ooh, I love that. Moving at the speed of trust. Ooh, I'm going to use
if
that.
if you're moving at the speed of trust, it takes the pressure off. The inner critic can't say, "Well, you didn't meet that deadline. You're
Yeah,
behind schedule. You're not doing enough," right? The voice that
yeah.
wants to come in. And I'm at 76. I've done 76, 24 to go. I was going to finish before Christmas, and my dog injured her ligament on her knee and needed to have surgery, which meant we've been home all winter. And that was a great reminder that as much as I built in intuition and flexibility in the structure of golfing, all of these courses, someone would recommend a place. Oh, go here, try that. Sounds good. I'm going to put it on the list. Oh, this weather is wonderful. I'm going to stay longer and play here. This wonderful element of balance I wove into the 100 courses, giving myself permission to rest when I needed, giving myself the energy with people I found I liked. I leaned into that when it was when
Yeah.
I was appropriate. And then again, letting it be 76 out of 100 I didn't finish by Christmas. Am I a worse person? No. Is my goal done? No. Am I going to go right back at it when the weather is great? Yes.
You
It's
meant
just
next Christmas.
it just changes shape.
2026. Come on.
And I think that's also a good reminder too. We can have this blind ambition, and I could have pushed through it. I could have had my dog in the van uncomfortable and drugged up,
Yeah.
but that's not the life I want to live. That's not the life I want her to live. And so we're weaving in these beautiful elements of our life, and the golf start gave me structure. It gave me purpose. It got me out to meet new people. It gave me an opportunity to be in nature. All of these structural elements that benefit us, whether we're going through trauma or not, grief or not, and yet a loose enough playbook to find the nuances, appreciate the flexibility. When things come in unexpectedly, how do I see them as a gift? What am I going to learn instead? I met you, Nicole, because of this downtime. And that's a wonderful thing. Giving yourself the space
Yeah.
to see those gifts is one for yourself.
It's so important to be able to pivot in life. I'm not saying that goals aren't important. Everybody needs to have a goal. Everybody needs to have a vision of where we want to go, but we need to take the pressure off to think that we know what's best for our lives, because there is a God that is always going to guide us and get us on that path or stop us from doing something. You weren't meant to do that 100 yet. You have 24 very specific golf games to play that maybe he knows, but you just haven't figured that one out yet. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't want to give this as an excuse for people to go, oh, I'm just going to sit here and wait, because that's not it either. Action is so important, but you need to be okay with the pivot while you're moving forward and not just be sitting down waiting for that pivot to happen.
Yes, I'm writing the book. I already have my
Yeah.
book proposal ready for the space between each shot. The space is where the magic happens. Let the space be
Yes.
there.
Yeah. And be okay with what happens. Like, we have to be okay. This world, if we think what's changed in the last 6 years is a thing, well, we got way more changes to come our way. And if we are not grounded in our purpose, because let's talk about that. We all have a purpose. If we are not grounded in our purpose, maybe Steve isn't here with us, but that man had a purpose. That man had such a purpose. And I know that his legacy is going to continue changing lives beautifully through the book. And what a way to honor your late husband. I'm very proud of you, Kym. I don't know how many people have told you that, but I am so proud of you for what you've turned this in. And I know a few people, actually one particular person just popped into my head. She's gone through one of the worst things you could possibly experience in life, and that's losing a child. And this was very, very fresh, and I'm talking in the last few months. If you have a message to her, and now that you've been through a horrible thing as well, what can you tell her and as give her hope?
This is how I viewed us as loving beings. We are liquid love looking for places to flow. And love, if it's a coin with two sides, the joy, the connectivity that we get in this human experience, like she did with her child, like I got to do with Steve, like many of us have had opportunities to do in numerous avenues, we get to celebrate that in this human form.
Yeah.
And the grief, when that side of the coin flips up, it's a reminder that I flowed love in this way. And what a gift that was. And how amazing an opportunity that was for me to give and receive love in the deepest, most spectacular ways. And the avenue has just shifted now. And it's always going to keep shifting. And if we go back to that mindset, it's I'm still here, liquid love, looking for places to flow. And this is going to make me tear up, but many
Oh, it's so
times
it's funny. My eyes were just getting teary too. So go away.
in those, I can very much relate because the first year without Steve felt like I was on a teeter totter opposite a sumo wrestler named Grief. And so many times I felt so out of control because I missed that avenue of love, of expression with Steve. And so there were pockets I started to connect with other people, but it took time for me to pour that love into myself again. And that's completely okay. In fact, it's necessary, it's essential. That's how you're going to get through this because you've got to fill yourself up with that love so that you know you have the strength to keep going. And I don't know how long that takes because for all of us, that's different. But you are that conduit of love. Keep flowing it to yourself. Keep receiving it in whatever ways you can. Even if other people don't get that, you deserve that. You are so worthy of getting that love. And then when the time is right, those next avenues for you to share that love will show up.
So powerful. That's such a gift you just gave her. Kym, I don't think you even realize the lives that you are going to change on this journey. And I'm so, like I said to you earlier, so proud of you and what you and Steve created because Steve's still part of this. He's still in on this. This is him. So, oh my goodness, it's amazing. So we're gonna have this conversation again in let's say about 6 months after you finish those golf games. You reach out to me.
Deal.
All right. Why don't you tell our listeners? I feel you and I could talk for hours, but why don't we tell our listeners now how they can reach you and what you are offering them a wonderful freebie as well. So that's going to be in the show notes as well. So why don't you tell people how to reach you, what you do and how you help people? That's a big one. And then what you're giving them.
The best way to find me is swagtail.com, inspired by my playful puppy. We got swag, all of us. Swagtail.com. There you'll get the free resources on how to start fine-tuning our attention. It's a skill, and we're bombarded with distractions. So in this 20-minute video training, you find out what's normal? Why is my mind wandering? How do I start to shift my focus back to what matters? And how do you start to refine that skill set? And so that'll be in the show notes. And then I do work with people. I teach monthly workshops on how to start to build more mental training tools, how to bolster this emotional well-being, because life happens. And the refractory period is how long we let that trigger affect us. The shorter the refractory period, it just might be a bad mood for a day. But you've met those people that have held on to things for 20 years, and that's become their personality. And we get to decide, do we want to be angry or joyful? Angry or satisfied? And so those monthly workshops are brilliant becoming. We're always in motion. And I do one-on-one with golfers who want to do that mindset specifically on the golf course as well.
Oh, I love it. So yes, and if for some reason you're driving and you didn't catch any of that, please reach out to me. I would love to connect you with Kym. Kym, thank you so much for that wealth of information and your heart, because that's hard what you just did. So I thank you so much because I know that there's someone listening to this that you just gave hope to. So thank you very much, my friend.
Well, thanks for having me, Nicole.
Today, we explored how honoring a legacy and understanding the mind body connection can lead us through the darkest seasons of our life. We've learned that whether it's through the discipline of storytelling or the freedom of play, we have the power to influence our own healing and embrace the miracles Underline miracles that are in front of us. This has been another episode of the comeback season, my friends. And remember, choose life and live out your purpose every single day. Thank you so much for joining us. Until next time. Thank you for joining us on the comeback season. Please remember, the conversations we share here are for informational and motivational purposes only. We are not licensed medical professionals, and this podcast is not intended to diagnose, treat, or replace guidance from your doctor or your healthcare provider. Always consult your healthcare team before making changes to your nutrition, your fitness, or your mental health routines. Your health and well-being comes first, and we want you to move forward safely with the right support for your journey.